Are you looking to refine your sales team and increase your company's revenue? Leading your sales team is an ongoing improvement process. Join Harry Newhan from Eric Lofholm International as he interviews top sales managers in the world. Discover the best practices that rocket them and their teams towards success. Boost your recruitment, motivation, and training techniques, leading you to build a top-producing, synergetic sales team. Welcome to CSI for Sales Managers.
We are back in the studio. This is Harry Newhan with continuous sales improvement for sales managers and the best practices. And we got a new guest here today. I'm excited to have him on board. He's got a really great background. It's different from what we've heard before. This is going to add some new dimension to our audience here. So we're excited to have Ali Younes, and Ali's coming to us from the Detroit area in Michigan. Actually, one of my neighbors. Probably we've never met before, but I'm sure everybody in Detroit feels like we're all neighbors. But I'm excited to have him on board, and we're going to talk about some exciting things that Ali's going to share with us. So, Ali, what I want to do first before we get into the interview and the questions. Wanted to take a moment and, first of all, introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about you and your background, because this is for sales managers and we want them to connect. We want you to connect with our audience and the best practices you're going to share in a minute. But tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Anytime I get to jump on and talk leadership with anybody and best practices, I'm super excited about it. So I was fired up when I got the email from you, and I appreciate it. Awesome. Simply put, I'm 32 years old. I'm currently the managing partner of the Mortgage Connection. We're located out of Canton, Michigan. We service the entire state of Michigan and then expanding on to Florida, Texas, and California here in the next couple of months. I have, even at a bright, what some people would say young age of 32, I have about 14 years of leadership experience in retail sectors, automotive sectors, and then most recently, 7+ years in the mortgage sector, financial. I absolutely love what I do. I wouldn't say I was born to be a leader. I just happened to stumble upon great leaders that inspired me to be a leader. They developed me not only as a person, but as somebody who can bridge the gap between people who are coming in just to make a great living and then eventually transition into leadership. So I always give thanks to the people that came before me and try to help me out. I'm a new father. My daughter Luna was born in October of last year, so that was
congratulations. There you go.
Appreciate it. And the world that we live in now ended up working out perfectly because now I get to work from home the majority of the day. I get to spend time with her as much as humanly possible, and I really feel like it's made me a lot better of a man. Now that I have a young daughter to take care of, so that's super exciting.
That is exciting. Well, congratulations. I think that
if you want to know some more wacky stuff, I'm a car enthusiast. I love anything that goes fast and anything that burns gas. I also love Japanese anime. It's just a weird thing, kind of a little mix, but that's a little action figures you got back there. So
there you go. Yeah. That's the human side of the leadership, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know what? And a lot of our audience, they want to know that we don't just want to be robots out there and leading and managing. We want to know the human side because that helps to describe our why we get up every single day, why we do what we do, why we reach for what we reach for. And with your diverse background, that's exciting. So let's go ahead and get right into some content and start with the first question. What do you feel has been most important for you, or what is most important to you about sales management?
Yeah, and I would say this is something that came about working alongside the number one mortgage lender in the country. I was taught very young, working in that environment, that culture is everything. Building a deep culture, a vision, kind of like a North Star of where everyone's aligned, everyone's going in the same direction, is the most important thing any sales leader or sales manager can possibly do. When a team and a leader knows the direction in which they're going and the plan is set in place to how to get there, everybody feels more comfortable, and executing on that plan is so much easier. That's one. The second thing is developing leaders. This is where, it kind of gets a little bit interesting. There are people that are excellent at driving the results. But the issue is when you take that person out of the room, when they're no longer at the helm of the ship, let's just say they're off on a weekend or they take a 2-week vacation or whatever the case may be, things tend to fall apart. It's super important to not only build a great culture, but you develop everybody into being a leader on their own. And they don't actually have to have the title, nor are they compensated for it, nor do they have to take on any additional work. But being a leader can be as simple as just explaining to somebody why it is they're doing what they're doing. When you're rolling out a play, do you explain the why behind it or the thought process behind it? Is that person involved in the decision making on your team, whether it's phone sales like mortgages, or it's auto sales, or it's retail, or it's any sector that you're in? Do you just roll out a plan, or do you actually take the time to explain to your team members why it is that you're rolling that out? And you'll be very surprised. It'll get a lot of gears rolling in their mind, and they become such an integral part of your team because they then start thinking outside the box because you're teaching them those things. I really do believe that building a great culture, developing your people into leaders, developing the person into a leader, those two things, the byproduct of that is production if you're in a role like mine, right? If you're a person that has production focus first, that's the number one thing on your mind, you're going to fail because you'll tend to do a lot of small things or short things that'll just give a short burst of production as opposed to the long route, which is developing a great culture and developing a great leader. I think encompassing both of those things, developing a culture and developing leaders, is you have to be really strategic on the ways that you're going to improve morale. Not everyone's going to have a good day every day, especially working at home. You lose the water cooler talks. You're not able to walk by somebody, give them a pat on the back or a fist bump. So you got to be strategic on how you're going to do that. How do you boost engagement, especially working virtual, right? How do you build deep, real connections with the people that you lead every day? Not fake ones just because you're trying to get them to go the direction you want them to go, but do you have a real connection with that person? Because when you do, people not only tend to follow you, but they tend to give you that extra effort that you're looking for every single day. And can you inspire confidence? If you can be strategic about all those things, you're going to develop a great culture and you're going to develop great leaders. And that's just the way I've always run my business. So,
that's exciting the way you share that, because the culture part of it. I've seen so many situations where they have vision, but the vision doesn't necessarily equate or work in the synergy with the direction or the plan. So to have both, to have all those, have the vision with the direction and a plan to execute the vision, is so important. And you hit that really good. And then developing leadership, that reminds me of an old phrase from Zig Ziglar. If you help enough people get what they want, you automatically get what you want. And when you develop those leaders underneath you, that's how you grow, not only personally, but also you grow in your business. And you're right. A business falls apart if you don't have that structure in place where people can step into that role and help you. And that's really what it's about, is that synergistic working together. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
No problem.
So let's talk about putting that structure or that culture together. What do you feel is your best training idea to accomplish that? Having the culture and then also developing up the leaders underneath you.
Well, that's an interesting question, because before you get into like the best practice, for all the inspiring leaders that are on this call, they're going to be watching this video later on. It's first you got to figure out, like, how do I identify what best practice or what trainings I need to run? I mean, there's been plenty of time in my career where I've had leaders that have worked alongside me, whether it's me being a vice president, having directors working alongside me that, come up with this amazing training. And then I say, hey, that's awesome, but we're actually really good in that area. Can you find something else that we can put that energy towards? So I think identifying what training that are needed is probably the most important thing there. So then you say to yourself, okay, well, how do I identify what that training is going to look like? Well, it's super simple. It's number one is you got to ask yourself, what's the issue that I'm solving for? Whether you're looking at KPIs, key performance indexes, metrics, whether you have a metric packet in front of you, or my favorite, you just have a feedback session with other people that are on your team. Again, we talked about developing leaders, right? You should have an inner circle of people on your squad that you go to when you're just trying to figure out ways to improve the business. Those feedback sessions are huge. Once you've identified what the issue you're trying to solve for is, you got to ask yourself, why is this currently happening? And it's only going to come down to two things, right? It's either a skill thing, right? Or it's a technology issue. If I talk about my field, which is mortgage related, we may drop 2 or 3% from our client allocated over to us, where we get a new client to speak to when we enroll them and they're now working with us, right? We got the business. We may drop 2 or 3%. You say to yourself, okay, is it a skill thing? Is it a technology thing? Did we change the lead flow? Are we getting it for different places? Technology is an easy fix, right? Now, if you identify it being a skill issue, then as a leader, this is the most important thing, is getting into the trenches and actually identifying it for yourself. In my business, it means getting on the phone. If I allocated a new lead provider and we all of a sudden start dropping 2 or 3% in conversion, I'm going to jump on the phone and try to figure out, okay, why is this happening? And better yet, not only am I going to jump on the phone because I do believe in my skill as a salesperson, but I'm also going to find, Harry, somebody who's excellent at it, right? Someone who leads my team or is in my region or wherever the case may be, even outside of my business, that is great at converting this specific type of lead or pulling credit more often on a client, whatever the case may be. When I find that person, I'm going to ask them why they're good. And hopefully they can articulate it in a way where then I can then take it, digest it, and package it together on a one-pager, on a little piece of paper that breaks down the steps to improve on that specific skill. So
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say that's a form of mirroring. Yeah. So you're mirroring what's actually working, and you're duplicating that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I figured out what issue I'm trying to solve for. Why is it happening? I identify it's a skill issue, not a technology issue. I get in the trenches myself and figure out whether I can overcome this issue real easy. I find somebody who's really, really good at it, and I pick their brain, right? I package it all together in a one-pager, because I truly believe as a leader, succession plans are important. For any organization to grow, I have to eventually get promoted somewhere. Sure. I have to go on to the next level. And if I don't have a succession plan, if I'm just doing things because I'm just naturally skilled at it, and I'm not solving the problem for the person who's going to come after me to take over that position or whatever the case may be, we're going to be solving the same problem for the next 10 years. Yeah. But if I can put it in writing, if I can actually get in the trenches, put it in a one-pager, right? Now I have a succession plan to hand that person that comes in after me and says, if you have that problem, turn to page 46 in your guidebook and just run this play. Now they can focus their energy somewhere else. Now you want to go a little bit deeper though. After you've identified that one-pager and you've figured out what that problem is and how you're going to solve it, you have to track the performance. So I'm going to hand that one-pager over to 2 or 3 of my experts, my guys or gals that I trust more than anything, and I'm going to have them run it. Think about it as like a control group, basically. And when I notice that they're able to increase the KPI or the metric because of this play, then I'm going to roll it out to everybody else. See, I think that's a key thing too for leaders, is sometimes we're afraid to admit that we made a mistake. So we'll develop a play or a new tactic or a way to fix or a training, and we'll just roll it out to the masses just because it looks good. But you don't actually know if it works or not. So you have to have a small test group before you roll it out to the masses. That way you can adjust things as you go, because there may be better ways of doing something. Again, succession plan. I don't want anyone else solving the same problem that I can solve myself. And if you actually want to talk about like a specific example of a training that I developed, in 2018, late 2018, we've seen the rates skyrocket to pre-recession levels, right? To points where they're at. We were selling 4.75s and 5% on conventional mortgages, where now we're still in the 2%, half, right? And what we found is when we were presenting options to clients who called in to save money every month, that we would save them $80, $90, $100 a month, and the client would then tell me it's not worth it. I don't want to go through a 15, 20, 30-day process just to save $100 a month. And then we'd get off the phone with the client, and we'd realize, like, we'd go through their debts because we can see everything. And we'd say to ourselves, man, this person literally is living paycheck to paycheck, and $100 a month in savings, a skip mortgage payment, and $2,000 in additional cash back at closing. They didn't find value in that. Well, why? Well, Harry, people are smart. Clients are smart. The average American is a very smart person, right? That does help them. The problem is we weren't able to explain to the client their current financial situation, because the client doesn't even know. I mean, most people don't budget. Most people don't know how much money they have going out versus what's coming in.
I know, right?
So we developed a play called the Average American, where we would sit on the phone with a client, for a short period of time, and we would go over the things that are on their credit report, and we would say you have a $2,000 a month in credit reporting debt. Then we would talk about the other things in life. Think about your gas, your groceries, think about child support, think about daycares, all the stuff you have to do when you're working from home. And we would ask the client, just ballpark that for me. What do you think you spend on other debts every month? That client may say, $2,000 a month. So now you have $4,000 in expenses. The client says yes and agrees. Then we say, okay, well, what do you net? What do you take home every single month? Client then tells us, well, I take home about $4,500 a month after taxes. Well, Mr. Client, you only got about $500 left over. Well, do you put that money into savings? No, quite honestly, I don't. I don't put into savings. Other things come up and I'm living paycheck to paycheck. Now, when we go present that option to the client later on, and the client says, I don't find value in $100 worth of savings, skip payment and $2,000, maybe additional cash back at closing, we can remind them of where they are financially. It's great selling tactics because you're reminding the client why it is that they should be doing this refinance, even though they're not saving as much as they thought they were going to save. Now, we developed that because we identified an issue, we figured out why it was happening. I got on the phones, talked to people that were still successful in a high rate market, put it together on a one pager, tracked the production as we went. And from there, I'm not going to turn the camera, but there's an entire cupboard of awards that we were able to get after 2018 when we went on an absolute tear because we were able to help out more clients and everybody because of a training like that. That's a great question.
That was really smart that you actually tested it. I'm a firm believer of testing all the way from advertising to promotional stuff to systems. And testing, you're right. Why blow the whole wad on your whole group without testing it first to make sure it works? And that's an exciting thing. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you so much for that. And obviously it's worked extremely well.
I think being vulnerable as a leader is a great thing. It's like if you can develop a training and if it doesn't work, if it's not the right play to do, telling people, hey, that didn't work, let's go back to the drawing board, as opposed to just saying, we're just going to roll it out. It happens a lot. And you see a lot of big Fortune 500 companies pay dearly because they continue to roll out something even though they probably should have went back to the drawing board.
Oh, yeah. Case in point, how about the new Coke?
Yeah.
They didn't test that, did they?
Oh, yeah.
No, that was probably before your time, but that was a marketing disaster that ended up rebounding, but they didn't test it. So let's move on to the next topic because that was really, really well covered. Thank you so much for that. Now you talk about developing up leadership underneath you, which leads me to the next question of as far as finding those people. What would you share with our audience today on your best recruiting advice or interviewing advice or hiring advice to find those people that you can identify, and maybe you bring them up from the ground up and they just fall in there, but what would you share with our audience on those topics?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in embracing technology and the power of social media. Some people are so hell-bent on taking their phones away from their kids because they're on social media all the time. I just say that's just the new way that this generation now looks at the world, right? We're so connected 24/7. And as a potential employer or somebody who's looking to recruit, especially the top talent that's available out there, if you're not embracing technology, especially social media technology, then you're kind of falling short. Like there are platforms out there, and I'm not going to go into names specifically, but there are platforms out there that can do scheduling for you. They can do background checks. They can train. You can load trainings in there, onboarding. It can communicate text messages and emails with potential recruits that you're trying to bring into your company. But the problem with all of that technology, the problem that it doesn't solve is it doesn't initially find the person for you. You still have to go find them to be able to load them into that system to go figure all that kind of stuff out. Right. You have to find the right candidate that believes in your mission and in your culture. We used to say things in a past life like they need to fit. They need to fit our company. Well, we know now, especially with for the lack of a better term, censored the world is nowadays, and we want to be inclusive and diverse. That we have to also admit to ourselves as leaders and as employers that we don't need to find people that fit us. We need to go fit them. We need to change the way that we do things to go find those people. And that's where social media comes. So what are ways that you can do that? Well, developing a strong presence on platforms like LinkedIn, Glassdoor is another one. You got your Instagrams, you got your Twitters, things like that. Sharing success stories about your company employee spotlights when someone does a great thing or has a great month? Like, are you spotlighting your employees, giving them, some recognition on there? Are you talking about the benefits of working with your organization versus other organizations? And is that information, all those three things that we just talked about, is it accessible online? I'll let a lot of people know that, like, even at my age, I feel very connected with the prior generation of leaders that did things the old school way. And I feel still connected to the younger generation that doesn't actually like to talk to somebody on the phone when they call to give them information about a potential place that they can work. They would rather.
Let me interrupt you for a second. So this is really good. So you use social media to find a prospect, and then you filter them through some of those screening or assessment softwares or platforms that you were talking about to make sure that your initial observation is good enough for your company and you're good enough for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also proactively putting the success stories, employee spotlights, the benefits of my organization. I'm putting them proactively online because I'm realizing that this generation that's coming up of potential people that want to be employed by your organization, they're not talking to you over the phone trying to figure out why they should work for you. They're going online and doing research on it. And if you're not an organization that proactively places things online that's easy and accessible, then you're going to fall short because, there are a lot of successful people now that work for places like a Google or a Facebook. I mean, those are like the pinnacle companies that everybody in IT wants to eventually work for, right?
Right.
Well, why? Because you can just simply go online and even turn on the TV and you can see Google headquarters and them riding bikes back and forth and the way that their environment looks. Google does that proactively, especially opening up downtown next to Little Caesars Arena. They've done a lot of advertising about that, making people want to work for them. Now you have candidates chasing the company as opposed to the company chasing the candidate, right? So be proactive on social media, put your spotlights on there, share your success stories, talk about the benefits of working with your company, and have a large presence, and you'll have people knocking down your door to want to work with you. I have one more thing I want to cover there, and it's something that people don't talk about very often, and that's retention. A lot of times you'll find yourself recruiting hopefully you're recruiting because you're growing. That's a great thing. Yeah. But a lot of companies, they're recruiting because they're losing people. People are leaving for other opportunities. So as a leader, you have to think to yourself, well, what's your play around retention? How are you keeping your people there? And I got a quick story about that. Working with the lender I was working with prior, as you got promoted through the ranks, there was a new banking cycle and then a veteran banking cycle. So you'd start in new banking as you developed your skill and you get promoted to the veteran world. Well, as a leader, it's the same thing. When you wanted to become a leader, you'd go back to new banking to train the newest team members. So when I was promoted to VP, I went back down to new banking where I had some of the newest team members in the organization, 0-dayers, literally day one, never picked up the phone, and we had to teach them things from scratch. Well, we found ourselves as an organization, we found ourselves losing as many people per month as we were hiring. Think about that.
Wow.
Think about that from a cost standpoint. The amount of money you spend training somebody and you're just losing them. Why? Well, we were able to identify it. The number one reason, and this company did a great job of trying to figure it out and always trying to improve the company culture. It wasn't the culture, trust me. We found out that the majority of people that were leaving was due to a work-life balance. It's sales, it's commission. So it's going to be long hours and it's going to be grueling because, you can be a high school dropout making $400,000 a year, and that's the only position that you can do something like that. Right. That's why sales is amazing. So after we were able to identify that the majority of people we were losing was strictly due to the amount of hours that they were putting in, we started looking at ourselves as leaders and said, what's the average amount of hours that people are putting in? And we found out they're putting in close to 70 hours a week, 6 days, and in some cases almost 7.
That's a lot.
Yeah, because as opposed to teaching the bankers skill, when they were underproducing, they would just work more. It wasn't told to them; they weren't forced to come in, but it was like you're in a commission-based role and you want to make a living, so you would find yourself working more. So what did we do? We went back and I said to myself, I guarantee I can get the same amount of production, if not more, if I can make my people happy. Because if you get happy people, they're going to run, right? Especially in the time there. Sure. So we took that 70-hour work week and we compressed it down into, we scheduled them for 50 and said you're not able to work more than 55. We also gave them 2 protected weekends a month where we said, these 2 weekends a month, you are not allowed to sign in. You can't work, you can't do anything. Now, this isn't a refi boom, so we're not doing this to save money.
Right.
But what we found was people's production skyrocketed. They were much, much happier at work. People's families enjoyed having them around more often, right? And what you would find is retention ended up, the percent of people that we retained ended up going up at almost 75%.
Wow.
We lost a much smaller amount of people because we made that adjustment.
That's huge.
So when you're thinking about recruiting, also think about that. Am I recruiting because I'm growing? Great problem. Or am I recruiting because I'm losing? If you're losing people, then I don't know if the social media is going to be the fix for it, or the technology around hiring, like hiring a recruiter, is going to be the fix for it. I think you need to go back and look at what is it in your culture or your schedule or maybe compensation that's causing people to go somewhere else.
Yeah, you're almost like a diagnostic doctor as you're going through the system and saying, okay, is this the issue? And you realize that's not. Okay, well, is this the issue? And you go through the process until you find the breakdown, or you find the weak link in the chain. That's really insightful. So thank you for sharing that. And that may roll us right into the next solution, because that is somewhat motivating. And I was going to ask you, what do you feel your most successful motivating idea was or is? And that could be motivating, caring about the workers, caring about what they're doing in their family life. That has a certain level of motivation. Did you have another thing that you used for motivation, or was that significant enough?
Yeah, I think that's leadership 101. How are you able to motivate your team and inspire your team to go up and beyond, right? That's any good sales leader. If you think about any organization that you work for or anyone else does, you have a company that provides all of their leaders, especially in like banking, because you're competing against other VPs or other directors.
Sure.
It's competitive, right? So how do you, if you're getting the same lead flow, working the same amount of hours with the same talent and the same training, how is it that one leader is able to absolutely get the most out of their team where others struggle? Well, that differentiating factor right there is that motivation. Couple best practices there. It all revolves around one common philosophy, which is to celebrate the small wins. A team member may look at a win as what their commission check looks like at the end of the month, or what their paycheck, their salary, whatever the case may be. But it's a long month. It's 30 days.
Yeah.
So when you have a team member that's doing great, well, they're going to ride that wave, and you don't got to worry about them. But I always told myself that if I had a team, I can break them down into numbers. Ones being they're amazing and I don't have to give them any coaching and they're excellent the way they are. Twos are, above average bankers that if I gave attention to, they would absolutely crush goal. And then there's your threes, which are bankers that no matter how much energy and effort that you give to them, they're not finding a whole lot of success. I personally love going after the twos and the threes. Most people just ride their racehorses. You have a very small amount of racehorses on your team. You got to work with the others. So finding those small wins and being able to motivate people through a 30-day month, it's the small wins that count. So how do you do that? Well, the first thing I call it snaps. At the beginning of every meeting, regardless, whether it's a morning meeting or a midday huddle or end of the day meeting, you always start the meeting off with taking 5 or 10 minutes, whether it's virtual or in the office, whatever the case may be, to acknowledge the little victories that normally would just fade in the background. Someone had a great phone call or had a great conversation, or somebody walked over to another banker's desk and taught them something, even though they weren't asked to do that because you developed them as a leader. They shared knowledge. You may forget about that tomorrow when you wake up and having your coffee, but right then and there, you noticed it. Write it down and then prop them out in front of the group. And you'll find yourself as a leader propping out the people who are successful because you have reasons to prop them out. When you're paying attention to your twos and your threes, the people on your team that don't outproduce maybe the other producers, you'll catch them doing the right thing, not catch them doing the wrong things. And when you do that, write that down and give them praise in a meeting. And I always just say, like, hey, Harry had a great phone call. He wasn't able to obtain the business, but he figured out the client's needs. He developed a great relationship, and she gave him a referral. Everybody give Harry a snap. And that's it, and you're done. And that snap is engagement. Now people are engaged in that meeting. And you started off on a very positive foot. Now, if you have to go down a bad route, and by bad I mean like you got to get feedback or you're not having a great day, the message will be digested a lot easier because you started it off very positively, right? The second thing in terms of small wins is the social. I call it a social hour, whether it's once a week or every biweekly, whatever the case may be. But when your team accomplishes something, even at the end of the month when you guys had a great sales month or not a great sales month, no matter what, you have yourself a social hour where you can talk to the group and thank them for the effort that they put in for the month. Whether it's sending them a gift card to Starbucks, or if it's virtual, everybody grabs a drink if they do drink, whether it's water, pop, or whatever the case may be. And you guys just sit for an hour and you guys just kind of go back and forth. Again, us being in a virtual environment now, you don't have that water cooler, like, let's build morale in the office. You have to stay engaged with people, especially on a team level. So those social hours are massive, and you can pick strategically when they're going to happen, put them in the calendar proactively so people can plan their days around them. You're not just dropping it on them the day of. And then lastly is the individual conversations. I was a big fan of the individual text messages. I would send text messages to everybody, whether they're doing good, and if they weren't doing good, I would even send them a thing at night saying, I believe in you. I know you're going to do great. I got a couple things for you tomorrow. Come in ready to roll, and no matter what, I got your back. People want that. I want that. You want that. I'm live on Instagram right now, and I got 100 people watching. Everybody wants it. You know what I mean? So don't just praise the people that are doing great. Talk to the ones that aren't finding success and let them know you got their back in an individual text. That way they know that you're thinking about them. And then I always say, in that same vein where you're sending individual texts, thank you cards. You know how many times I used to sit on my desk and just write notes to someone's spouse? Just to say, hey, thank you. I know your husband worked a ton of hours last month, but he had a great paycheck. And through some, deep conversations, I knew that he was buying a house, and now he was able to put a large amount of money down, lowering the payment. And I go, thank you very much for sticking by him.
Yeah, that's something we don't hear a lot. We don't hear a lot about what you just said about recognizing the spouse and the family. But you're right; they pay an equal price.
Hey, listen, the loved ones in someone's life could be your best friend or your biggest Achilles heel.
You're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
If you're going home after, especially in sales, if you're going home after a rough day on the phones, and then you go home to an environment where people are questioning why it is that you're doing what you're doing because you're not finding the success, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that a sales leader proactively reached out to a spouse. Again, you're not doing it because you want to pump more production. You're doing it because you genuinely care about the person. You want to thank their spouse, whether husband or wife or whatever the case may be, a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. You just want to thank them for being there for them. And whether this works or it doesn't work or they're going to find success, who cares? It's like the fact that you're there by their side. I appreciate it. Here's a great note from me. And I write it. I'm not writing it out to Harry and delivering it. I'll send it to Sandy, and I'll send it to the house. So she opens it and she goes, hey, your leader sent me a great letter. Read it. That's massive.
Yeah, no, that's really good, Ali. That's you don't hear, like I say, you don't hear a lot about that. There is one thing you mentioned, celebrating the small wins. I heard a phrase a little while back. The small things aren't the small things. The small things are everything. And if you do that, recognition in every study that's been done rates higher as a motivator than more money. Yeah. More money is like fourth or fifth on the list. Recognition is number one. And the way the conversation has gone, what I want to do is kind of go into the other side. What do you feel has been a setback that you've had in your career that you've been able to not only learn from, but rebound? So what setbacks would you like to share that stimulated something and you learned? I mean, that's one of the ways we learn is by having setbacks. Not everything's a success. Nothing rarely goes straight up. But what can you share with our audience today so that they can relate on that level as well?
Yeah, I've always been very good at identifying problems and solving them. I've always been great at communicating with people in a way that they understand. I can talk to the Harvard professor, and I can also talk to the person who's never done a mortgage or anything financial in their life. And I can change the way I articulate the message so it's easily digestible to them. So when I first got into the mortgage industry, that took me far. I remember starting in October, at the end of the year in October, in my first month, I was out producing veteran bankers. I won Rookie of the Month, and I was one of the fastest promoted bankers to directors in the history of the company.
Wow!
Because of that message, because of my ability to communicate. So when I became a new banking director, inside of 60 days, I was promoted to veteran director, which usually would take anywhere between 6 months to a year.
Wow.
So I was fast tracked. When I got to the veteran level, yeah, I was basically the golden boy, right? I was surefire first round pick, number one overall that you could. I was Peyton Manning. I was Troy Aikman. This guy is going to come in and absolutely light the place up. Inside of 90 days, I wasn't. I was Ryan Leaf. I was Jamarcus Russell for any of my football fans. Right? I was not good. I was in the bottom 10% of all leaders in the company.
Wow.
And I remember getting pulled into the office of my senior vice president. His name is Chad, by the way. One of the greatest men I've ever met in my life. And he pulled me in the office and he went through my numbers and he asked me my opinion on what I thought was going wrong. And in most cases of leaders that I've interacted with, that conversation would normally end with, here's a stack of papers. Here's what I want you to fix. Go fix it. Chad actually said, we're going to meet again tomorrow after I digest this and I try to figure out what's the game plan. He knew that I didn't know what was going wrong. He knew it. So instead of him just saying, you need to fix it or you're not going to be in this role, he said subconsciously that he's going to make sure I succeed. So he took a whole day to think about the game plan, put it together in writing for me and delivered it to me the next morning and said, here are the things I want you to focus on. And he asked me, because what are my thoughts? I'm a bottom 10% director in the company, baby. You shouldn't be asking me anything. I don't know what. But he
saw the raw potential.
Yeah, and he wanted me to really think about it.
Yeah.
He wanted me to think, like what are my thoughts on it? Like, do I think that these are going to help? And I ended up saying, yes, I also think we should add one other thing. I forgot what it was. And he also goes, I want to tell you, after talking to you, I talked to your team the other day. So I guess he had met with me, and then he didn't meet individually. Like he was just walking through the lunch line, and he knew the people. This guy at the time was running a site of probably over 1,000 people.
Wow.
But he knew the individual people on my team, and he walked up to him. He said, "Hey, walk me through the ways you think Ollie can improve on things." And he identified what my problem was. The problem I was having was I was so good on the phones, but I was so bad at actually teaching people what it is that I did. I couldn't teach it. So when I had a problem, what did I do? I said, put the client on hold, tell me your leader is going to talk to you. And I would just go talk to the client. I would sell whatever I needed to sell to the client, solve the problem. Client was happy, and I'd hand the headset back to the banker. I would fist bump the banker, and I'd walk away and put a notch on the board like we just won. But the problem is I didn't teach the banker anything. The banker said, I can't catch a fish. I took the rod, I caught the fish, I gave it to him, I walked away.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
You were fishing for him instead of teaching him how to fish.
Yeah, so at that point, he said, you need to now start motivating, instead of just jumping on the phone, motivating and teaching your team the way that you do things. So I started listening to calls of my own calls when I was a banker. I started listening to banker calls. I started writing things down. I started meeting with my bankers once a week and putting together game plans for them. The same way that Chad did it with me, where he met with me, asked me what I thought was wrong, gave me some information, took a day, researched it, put together a solid plan, asked me what my thoughts of the plan are, and then followed up with me every 3 days on my execution of the plan. I started doing that with my bankers. And then guess what? It was sky's the limit from there. So I tell that story because, no matter what it is, whether you're somebody who, you don't have any skill, but you can just out hustle the person next to you.
That's not duplicatable.
Yeah, or you're someone who has a ton of skill, but you're not a big hustler, but you're just so good at what you do. It's no matter what, even when you fall, if you have the right leaders in place that can help you and guide you through those problems, you can come out on top. Because listen, if I had the wrong leader, I wouldn't even be talking to you right now. This would be a totally different conversation. I would probably be in a different line of work. But he didn't just tell me you need to fix it or you're gone. He actually said, let's fix it together, which to me, that's what started my obsession with making sure that I take care of my people instead of just driving production.
Yeah, he was teaching you how to teach. And that's a powerful lesson. You're right. A lot of top level people don't take the initiative or the time to teach how to teach. They just expect, go do it, go figure it out. And that teaching how to teach is powerful. So thank you for sharing that. One last thing before we wrap it up. Any additional thoughts for best practices that you'd like to take a moment and share? And then we'll close up the call from here.
Yeah. I guess how much more time do we have? Because best practices, I got
2 minutes.
yeah. So number one is think what your leadership philosophy is. How does it show up in your business, and does your team know what your philosophy is? With me, it's being a high level communicator, being very transparent, letting people know what I think about them or their business or things, whether good or bad, right? And then you versus yesterday, right? I'm not competing with the person next to me. I'm just trying to be better than what I was yesterday, which is a common cliche. Um, it shows up in my business every day. My team, you could walk around my region and ask everybody. Everybody knew that's what it was because I had it on a big board in my office, right? The only other best practice that I have, and I think it's the most underutilized tool ever, is the one-on-one, the individual coaching. I would have, no matter how large my team was, I would do bi-weekly one-on-ones with everybody. I would have one personal and one business bi-weekly. So, both would happen every month. In that meeting, I would recap the prior meeting, what goals we set, and then what was the execution on the piece. If we produced well or we fixed the problem, if it's a business meeting, I would set a plan moving forward. Do we continue focusing on the same metric, or are we able to move on now to something different so I could develop people, right? If this was a personal meeting, then I would go back and talk about, hey, we talked about you buying a house. Where are you in those stages? Have you found a realtor? Have you done this? Have you done that? Set goals for them. I write all of this stuff down, HR friendly stuff. I don't, obviously the super personal stuff I don't, but I write all of it down. I send it to them afterwards in a breakdown so it shows that I was engaged. I put my phone away. I don't look at it. And that way, when I have the next meeting, I can pull it back up. It's stored in my inbox, and I can say, hey, we talked about 1, 2, 3. And it shows that I listen. And at the end of it, I always ask them is, what do you want to talk about? The floor is yours for the next 10 minutes. And I just let them say whatever they want, whether it's just they want to vent or they want to ask about a way to fix a problem they're having, personal or business. And I just give them that time. And when it's in the calendar and when it's scheduled, at least the banker knows no matter what, even if you're super busy that week, they know they're gonna have your ear at some point during the week, right?
Right.
Which I think is super important. So the one-on-ones and knowing what your philosophy is, figuring out how it shows up in your business, and does your team actually know what it is?
Those one-on-ones really show that you care, and that seems to be a strong consensus from our speakers, is that personal one-on-one, getting to know your people, getting to know not only the business side, like you said, but also the personal side, and that's exciting. Well, here's what we want to do. We want to thank you very much, Ali. Don't jump off just yet. I want you to stick around just for a minute. I wanted to thank you very much for sharing these insights with our audience today. For everybody else, this was a great session with Ali Younes. Appreciate his experience, his education. Even though he's younger than a lot of us out there, he's got some vast experience and great golden nuggets. I took a page and a half of notes. I'm excited about rewatching this after it's over and after we upload it. But we want to thank everybody. Come back on Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we'll have a new guest. And this is Continuous Sales Improvement for Sales Managers. My name is Harry Newhan. Have a great night. Thanks again, Ali. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe to get notified of the latest episode. Also, to learn more about improving your sales team, visit continuoussalesimprovementforteams.com. See you in the next episode, and have a great day.